When Jordan pried open the old mahogany drawer in the upstairs bedroom, something hissed loudly. Just a soft, whispering intake of air, like the room itself had exhaled. Inside lay a small antique key nestled in a bed of blackened dust. Its metal slick with condensation and strangely warm, as if it had just been held. A sharp, coppery smell rose, instantly metallic and rotting like old coins mixed with decayed meat. He recoiled, gagging on the sudden taste of bile in his throat. Behind him, the floor groaned, but no footsteps followed. The room was quiet again, too quiet. The walls, once plain, now crawled with faint cracks shaped like claw marks. When Jordan touched the dresser, the wood felt cold and wet, like something had been crying into it for years. He caught a flicker in the mirror, a man in black robes, face burned away, whispering over blueprints etched in ash. It was gone in a blink, but something clung to Jordan's chest, panic, thick and suffocating. Beneath the key, he found a folded parchment, brittle and torn, with symbols scrawled in dried blood. Warning in an old dialect: the room's shift. For the sacrifice, the house must feed. He stumbled back. The room trembled. The chandelier above him swayed without wind. The walls bled, briefly thin rivulets of black ichor trickling from the corners, before vanishing like sweat into plaster dot in Rahim Yar's folklore. This was Ginny Manzo, the house that changed to trap the soul, a myth told to keep children out of the woods. Locals once burned frankincense at thresholds and drew salt lines across doors. But the rituals had failed here. Then silence. Relief. Maybe the vision had been a stress response. He exhaled, laughed, shakily. But behind him, a new door was creaking open, one he knew hadn't been there before. Asterisk. By daylight, the mansion feigned normalcy. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, warming the intricate woodwork and dust-draped furniture. Jordan almost believed it almost okay, but every surface was too still, too quiet. The air tasted faintly of rust and something sour, like old bile rising in the throat. The floor creaked beneath his bare feet, not from age, but from something. Beneath it was a deep, groaning protest, as if the house resented his steps. Each morning, rooms were rearranged. The dining room, once beside the foyer, had vanished entirely. The bathroom now led into a linen closet that wasn't there before. The hall stretched longer every time he walked it. The scent of rotting wood and copper seeped through the wallpaper. At night, whispers slid through the vents, fragments of prayer, weeping, sometimes laughter, and his name. Always his name. In the attic, he found a hand-carved box lined with goat hide, filled with burned bones and a talisman made of woven hair. A quaint voice whispered from inside the box, a rasp that said, Elias summoned her in stone and fire. The house remembers. Jordan's mind frayed. Sleep brought visions, rituals, and candlelight. Blood on the walls, chants in forgotten tongues, hooded figure bleeding from the eyes, carving floor plans into human skin. He began talking to reflections, watching himself twitch and flinch in mirrors that no longer matched his movements. Desperate, he remembered local stories. Don't whistle in an empty house, the old women warned. It calls her attention. They'd tried salt lines, goats, blood, saffron smoke. All had failed. The entity thrived in defiance of boundaries. One afternoon, everything fell. Still, no whispers, no creaks. The air smelled clean. Jordan dared to breathe, but then his phone lit up. Camera detected movement in attic. He was holding the phone, and he was not in the attic. Asterisk. At first, Jordan convinced himself it was just stress. Old houses groaned. Drafts whispered through vents. But that night, as he stood at the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched farther than before, too far. The walls narrowed, pulsing slightly, like lungs inhaling behind peeling wallpaper. Every step echoed back to him, but not in time. Something else was mimicking his rhythm always. One beat too late. The air thickened with a nauseating stench decay soaked in iron. He gagged as a sour, coppery taste clung to his tongue. The banister was slick and cold, like touching wet bone. His fingertips burned slightly after pulling away. The house wasn't just old, it was alive. At the end of the corridor, the door to the study stood ajar. A cold breeze pushed it open, revealing the room had changed again. The desk was gone. Instead, a circle of ash stained the wooden floor, surrounded by melted candles and scattered teeth. Human, judging by the fillings. His breath caught. Then, the flickering image of a young girl in tattered white danced at the edge of his visions, sobbing, flickering like static before she vanished behind the wall. Jordan remembered tales from the nearby village. A girl lost in his house over a century ago. Locals had whispered she was offered to bind the spirit to last, desperate rite. Her name was Ara. The sacrifice hadn't ended the curse, it had fed it. For a moment, everything fell silent. Number creaking, no breathing walls, even the air stilled. Jordan laughed a weak, broken laugh of relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe acknowledgement had appeased it. But then he noticed the ash circle was gone. The floor was clean, too clean, and a child's handprint was smeared in blood across the ceiling. Above him, facing down, asterisk, driven by a trembling curiosity, in the hope that understanding might be his salvation. Jordan began digging. Dust-covered trunks, hidden crawl spaces, and warped floorboards concealed more than just rot. In a sealed cabinet behind a bookshelf, he uncovered a priest's journal from 1872, pages fused with blood and wax. The priest wrote of a girl taken by the villagers, offered in fear to a being he called Zaratal the housebound, bound not by chains, but by worship, creature older than the earth's bones. As Jordan read, the ink seemed to shift, words twisted, letters melting like flesh and fire. The journal whispered to him long, drawn-out moans that hissed through the air like steam escaping from a wounded pipe, every syllable pressed against his skull, behind his eyes, in his teeth. The study walls began to sweat. Thick, black ooze dripped from between the panels, smelling of burning hair and sewage. The floor pulsed beneath his feet, warm and soft like muscle. His stomach turned, bile bubbling up his throat as he backed away. Clutching the journal like a lifeline, he tried one of the old purification rites he'd read about drawing the salt. Circle, whispering an Urdu prayer once used by shrine keepers. For a moment, everything stilled. The air cleared. Even the copper rod faded. "K," cried actual tears relief washing over him like warm rain. Then the lights flickered. The salt hissed. And something laughed at not with the voice, but with the walls. They pulsed in and out, beating like a heart. A girl's voice whispered, "He lied. He fed her. They all fed her." Jordan turned to run, but the door was gone. In its place was a staircase spiraling down, wet and echoing, and at the bottom, something was breathing, waiting, and it knew his name. Asterisk, the stairs moaned beneath Jordan's feet as he descended. They felt damp and swollen, like stepping on waterlogged flesh. Each step echoed with the slithering sound just behind him, soft, wet, and wrong. The air grew colder, metallic. The scent of copper and rot clung to his throat like smoke. He tried not to breathe, but the taste still invaded, thick like blood, bitter like bile dot. At the bottom, the basement wasn't a basement anymore. It stretched impossibly wide, its walls lined with soot-covered mirrors that reflected movements he didn't make. Candles flickered on their own, casting long, swaying shadows that crawled across the stone. Toned in the center of the room sat a broken, cradle. Inside, a bundle of cloth twitched. He approached slowly, heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Or was that something else? The whispers returned, curling around his thoughts in a forgotten tongue. As he reached out, a vision slammed into his mind like a hammer. He saw villagers in a frenzy, faces painted with ash and fear. A ritual at the heart of the house. A baby, screaming, girl no older than 10 bound by chains made of hair. They offered her not to banish the evil, but to anchor it, to keep the house from spreading. But they failed. Zaratul wasn't caged. It was fed. Jordan snapped back. Cradle was empty. The whispers stopped. He staggered backward, laughing. It's not real. It's just the house. It's just the house. Then the mirrors cracked, one by one. Sharp, clean pops echoing through the chamber. He turned to run, but the walls began to weep. Thick, black tears slid down, sizzling where they touched the floor in one shattered mirror. Something stepped into view wearing his face, but smiling, and it blinked first. Jordan bolted from the mirror room, his breath hitching in short, ragged gasps. The taste of copper was thick in his mouth, as if he'd bitten through his own tongue. Every surface he touched felt icy, pulsing, alive. The walls now whispered, not in tongues, but in voices. He knew his mother's lullaby, his own laughter from childhood, was twisted and echoing down impossible hallways. He stumbled into what once was the dining room. The chandelier was now made of bone and hair. The table was set for 12, each plate piled high with rotten meat, swarming with flies. The stench hit him hard, sour decay, laced with something sweet, almost inviting. His stomach churned. He gagged. The bile burned his throat like acid. But then the room fell silent. The air warmed. The smell vanished. He blinked and everything appeared normal. Polished wood floors, clean linens. Daylight streamed through the windows, golden and gentle. For the first time in days, he wept from relief. That's when he saw the girl. She stood barefoot in the corner, dressed in a funeral shroud. Her eyes were gouged out, but tears of blood streamed down her cheeks. In her hand, she held a severed tongue, his tongue. When she opened her mouth to scream, no sound came. But inside Jordan's skull, 1,000 voices shrieked. He dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, eyes wide and useless. A nearby cabinet burst open. Inside, scribbled in charcoal on the walls, were failed warding symbols, till local talismans, made from salt, teeth, and saffron, shattered, melted, burned. One phrase kept repeating, "You cannot cage a god who feeds." Behind him, the girl touched his shoulder. Her fingers were wet, cold, and as he turned, saw the ceiling bleeding and the blood was falling upward. Jordan crawled through the narrow hallway, his fingers scraping along jagged wallpaper that felt like dry, peeling skin. The house had grown narrower, like it was breathing in, pressing him toward its heart. Each creak of the floorboards above sent a spike of terror through his chest. They weren't just settling sounds, they were footsteps, slow, deliberate, following the air thick. It reeked of copper and rot, like a butcher's freezer left open too long. A sweet, meaty stench that coated his tongue and made every swallow taste like blood. The walls pulsed wet and warm beneath his palms, beating like veins. Beneath decaying skin, he reached a door he hadn't seen before. Heavy, wooden, carved with symbols he recognized from a local pamphlet he'd found in town. Warnings, protections, glyphs etched centuries ago by desert mystics trying to contain something they called Ara al-Jaya, the starved soul. Legend said it was once a grieving god who fed on sorrow. The house, they claimed, was its anchor, Tina's mouth. Inside, the room was a child's nursery, untouched by the rot. Sunlight poured through lace curtains. Toys sat neatly on the shelves. For a moment, peace returned. Jordan collapsed to the floor, and sobbed, but the moment he wiped his eyes, the light turned gray. The mobile above the crib spun on its own, casting twisted shadows that didn't match the shapes. Then came the creaking, but this time from inside the walls. He backed away and kicked over a rickety rocking chair, revealing a hole in the floor. Inside, bones, piddle bones wrapped in bloodstained silk, and a name scrawled on the wall behind dim Jordan. His hands shook. He didn't remember ever being here as a child, but the bones were missing a jaw, and now so was he. The house didn't scream, it howled. A groaning, guttural roar shook the floor beneath Jordan's feet as he stumbled backward from the crib. The light bulb above him exploded, showering him in shards that hissed against his skin like tiny embers. The stench hit again, thick and vile, a choking mixture of burnt meat and spoiled milk, stuck in his nose, in his throat, turning each breath into a struggle. He tasted bile, then blood, and couldn't tell if it was from his mouth or the air itself. He fled the nursery, heart pounding. The hallway had changed, longer, narrower, the wallpaper now pulsed with something alive beneath it. Faces pressed. From the other side, mouths open in eternal screams. Huh. A girl's voice whispered, inches from his ear. You were always meant to feed him. He spun nothing. His piston mirror dynamite. His reflection was green. Skin pale, eyes black, lips sewn shut. He dropped to the floor, sobbing. His fingers brushed something beneath the baseboarder, brittle, leather-bound book. Inside, sketches of ritual circles, accounts of failed exorcisms, and a single passage underlined in blood-red ink. The house feeds. The starved soul sleeps only when it is full. He read about villagers in the 1800s who sealed the foundation with iron nails and buried 12 hearts beneath the doorstep. While something went wrong, one heart still beat. The hunger never ended. They burned the priest alive to contain it. Jordan laughed, then wept, then laughed again. His mind unraveled thread by thread. Then silence. The hallway opened, a door at the end, ajar. Sunlight spilled through it. Birds chirped. A hope bloomed like a cruel flower. He ran. The door slammed shut. The floor cracked open beneath him. And from the dark below, he heard his mother's voice say, "Dinner's ready." Jordan plummeted into the chasm, his scream swallowed by the house. He landed hard on something, soft, something that squelched beneath him. When he pushed himself up, his hands were slick warm, sticky. The coppery temps of blood coated his tongue before he even opened his mouth. Around him, severed limbs and shattered bones lay tangled in old toys, baby teeth, and hair still tied with ribbons. The walls breathed slow, wet inhalations. With every breath, the air thickened with rot and iron. In the dim red glow, he saw a mural etched into the stone. Primitive, frantic carvings told the story of the starved soul once, a healer in the village, accused of cannibalism when children vanished. The villagers, terrified, buried him alive beneath the unfinished home. But instead of silence, the ground pulsed with his rage. Blood leaked from the soil. Rooms shifted, and the house began to feed. Jordan stumbled forward, laughing uncontrollably. Now, his thoughts fractured like a mirror dropped on tile. He was sure he saw himself on the wall drawn in charcoal, mouth sewn shut. He bit his lip to check if it was still real. It bled for a moment. It stopped. The groan, the whispers, the pulse of the walls. He stood in a stone corridor, clean, dry, empty. He ran, found a stairwell, wood, normal, cold metal rail, light. He bolted up the steps. Another door. He flung it open. He was back in the living room. Morning light poured through the windows. His phone buzzed. 7:03 a.m. Relief choked him. Maybe it was all a nightmare. Maybe a shadow crossed the floor. He turned slowly, His own face stared back at him from the hallway mirror, but it blinked first, and it smiled. Asterisk Jordan stumbled backward, heart hammering so violently it felt like it might punch through his ribs. The reflection held its grin longer than it should have, too wide to know it. Then it vanished, leaving only static in the mirror surface, like a TV with no signal. The air turned sour, thick with the scent of rotting meat and scorched herbs. Somewhere above, the house groaned, as if stretching after a long sleep. He backed into the hallway, but it wasn't the hallway anymore. The floor was soft beneath his feet, fleshy, wet. The wallpaper pulsed faintly, veins running along its seams, oozing blood in rhythmic spurts. His throat burned with the taste of bile and iron. Whispers clawed at the edges of his hearing. Names he didn't know, but somehow remembered. Elias, Kira, Thomas, others the house had taken. He saw flashes of them in the flicker of light bulbs, scent-eyed, mouths filled with soil. He found an old book wedged into the wall, written in Urdu and Latin, sealed with a waxy handprint. The villagers had once tried to trap the spirit inside the foundation, binding it with goat blood, poppy, ash, and salt. But salt couldn't hold something that had already chewed through the roots of the house. The rituals failed. The priest who led them had disappeared mid-prayer, his bones later found fused to the fireplace stones. Jordan laughed, or screamed. The T couldn't tell anymore. He ran again, up a stairwell that bent downward, past doors that whispered, "Stay," in the voice of his mother. Then silence, a sunlit kitchen, the smell of toast, a radio playing jazz. He exhaled, safe, awake, a dream, until the toast bled down the plate, until the jazz warped into screaming, and from the fridge, a hand knocked, once, then twice. Then it opened.